Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to make one of my most highly requested things, and it is chocolate chip cookies. Now I actually adapted this recipe from a Martha Stewart recipe I found on her website, and I'll put the original link below, but I adapted a bit for my own to make it make the cookies a little more puffy, if that makes sense. They get a little bit higher, as you can see. And they kind of hold their shape better, but I will go through all of the steps for the recipe. You know, if you want to follow along, keep watching, and I will have a copy of the recipe linked below. The ingredients you will need for this recipe include 2 1/4 cups all-purpose flour, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of salt. And I like to put the salt when I'm baking. I'm usually doing a bunch of baking at once, so I put a little bit in a bowl. It's just easier to measure out of a bowl than out of the spout of the box. 1/2 cup granulated sugar, 1 cup light brown sugar, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, 2 large eggs brought to room temperature, and 1 cup or 2 sticks of butter. I like baking with Kerrygold butter. Make sure it's unsalted. 1 block of Kerrygold is equivalent to 1 cup or 2 sticks of standard size butter. And you will also need chocolate chips, M&ms, peanut butter chips, white chocolate chips, butterscotch chips, whatever combination of things you like to put in your chocolate chip cookies. I personally like to put M&ms in because it's a festive, you know, the M&ms comes out with all these festive holiday ones every year for all of the different holidays, and I tend to make these cookies the most often. So I do a combination of M&ms and then semi-sweet chocolate chips for my cookies, and I put in a little over a cup of each. I like to have my cookies be pretty full of chips and M&ms, so it's probably about 2 1/4 cups total of both. I don't really measure it that specifically. You'll need a large bowl to mix the dry ingredients in, and I sift using a whisk. I also have a large spoon out for when I'm going to be incorporating the dry ingredients with the wet, and a spatula for scraping down the sides of the mixer. I have my KitchenAid mixer out and ready to go with the paddle attachment to the side. Now you can use a handheld electronic mixer, or you can do this recipe by hand. Other tools you will need are cookie sheets. These cookie sheets we got from Williams-Sonoma. Parchment paper to line the cookie sheets with. Cooling racks to effectively cool your cookies. And this is optional, but a festive holiday apron is always a nice touch. Make sure your racks are in the center of your oven before you preheat it. I am putting in 2 sheets at a time, so I have 2 racks set in the center with room between so I can rotate the cookies. And I'm going to preheat my oven to 350 degrees. First, I'm going to sift my dry ingredients together in a bowl, excluding the sugar, which you will cream with the butter. We'll do that in the next step. So instead of doing a traditional spoon and level technique where you kind of pile on the flour and then take a knife to make it level on the top, I just keep my flour in the bag and use the side of the bag to level the flour as I'm bringing it out. So I just push it up against the side of the bag, like so, and I can kind of feel when it's level. So there's our 2 cups and our 1/4. We also need 1 teaspoon of salt. Just kind of shake that one to level it off. And I've already measured out 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. So we'll get that in there. Now to incorporate the ingredients and also sift them at the same time, I'm going to use a large size whisk. And this isn't a very time consuming process. You really just want to get some air in the flour and incorporate the salt and baking powder in it. So I probably just give it a good few times around for maybe about 20 seconds. Then I get my big spoon ready to go, and put this aside for later when we will incorporate it with the wet ingredients. Next, you want to cream your butter and your sugar. So I'm taking my 1 cup of room temperature unsalted butter. Like I said, I'm using Kerrygold. I call it my secret weapon in baking. And I bake without my wedding rings on specifically due to the butter. That way it doesn't get in my rings. I'm going to pop that in there. And then I've gone ahead and measured out the sugar. I have 1/2 cup of granulated sugar and 1 cup of packed light brown sugar. Put that in there. Now the butter and the sugars are in. We'll add in our paddle attachment. Make sure it's locked. And start mixing. Now you want to start slow so that the sugar doesn't come flying out of the mixer. So I start on low and then work it up to medium, high, incrementally. After about a couple minutes, I like to give it a good once over with the rubber spatula, good scraping down the sides and particularly around the bottom, just to make sure nothing's like really getting stuck in there. I don't worry too much about the actual paddle attachment because the flour will pick up the bits of that. Let's give it another 30 seconds on medium-high. That looks pretty good. One more scraperoo. That's a technical term, scraperoo. You should use that. Now I'm going to add my eggs and vanilla. I have 2 eggs cracked into a bowl. Like I said, they've been brought to warm temperature. And it's best to add eggs one at a time to any batter. And I just do this by popping in 1 yolk at a time. And then we're going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Let's put the mixer on medium. And then one at a time. Give it a second to incorporate. And the other one. Now I'll add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And let this mix on medium for just about 20 seconds. One last scrape. Really work the bottom bits off the bowl. Give it one more turn. That looks good. Now I have my sifted dry ingredients with the big spoon at the ready here on the side. So what I'm going to do is put this on low and add the dry ingredients a spoonful at a time, and I just mix a bit in between spoonfuls. Oven's preheated, that's always a good thing. I don't stop the mixer generally in this process unless the recipe calls for it. You know, there's really no need. When you're mixing on low, it's easy to drop the spoonfuls in between turns. So it's on low, and here we go. At the end of the bowl, I just dump the contents in. I'm going to let that work for a few seconds, and then we'll add the chips. That looks good. I'm going to reduce to stir and add my already measured out chips. Like I said before, this doesn't have to be an exact measurement. It's really what your preference is, and you can use any variation of different things. Really whatever suits your fancy. Now only run it on stir for just like 5 seconds. Otherwise especially if you're using M&ms, otherwise the mixer will crush your M&ms to oblivion. I just give it just a few seconds. That looks good. Let's remove the bowl from the mixer, and then we'll get to putting the cookies on the sheets. I'm just going to push the batter that's pretty heavily caked onto the paddle attachment with a rubber spatula into the bowl. And then I just run my rubber spatula kind of around the sides and underneath. Make sure everything's really been incorporated and there's no like big concentration of chips in one place. That looks pretty good. So now I'm going to get them on the sheets, and I use a 1 3/4 inch diameter cookie scoop to make uniformly sized cookies. So I just use the side of the bowl to kind of level the cookie dough like so. And I put between 10 and 12 cookies on a sheet. These spread a little but not a lot because we are going to set them up in the fridge so they won't spread as much as if we just put them in the oven right now. I generally start with 10 on a sheet. And just for your information, one recipe for me using this scoop generally yields anywhere from 40 to 44 cookies. Now I'm going to put the cookies in the refrigerator for about 15 minutes to set up, and this makes it so when they bake, they stay puffier more rather than spreading out. There you can see I've made room for them in the fridge, and while they're setting up, like I said, for about 15 minutes, I'm going to set the rest of the batter on sheets and start cleaning up. The cookies are in the oven out of the fridge, and we're going to put them in for a total of between 14 to 16 minutes. So I like to start on one side with 7 minutes, and then I rotate, and at the 7-minute mark I will check the cookies and see if they need any additional time added to the end. So either I'll put them in for 7 to 9 minutes in the last half, if that makes sense. The first half is out of the oven, and I'm just going to let them cool on the sheets for 5 minutes before transferring them to the racks to cool completely. And I let them cool for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. You want the chips to be totally cool before packing them up. Well, that was it. Pretty easy, as you can see, and I have done this recipe so many times I could probably do it blindfolded. It's just a simple chocolate chip cookie recipe. By changing some of the ingredients around a little bit and using the refrigerator technique to set up the cookies a bit before baking, it more often than not produces this shaped cookie, which I prefer. I think it's aesthetically pleasing, and it's also, you know, nice size to eat. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you make these cookies. Please tweet me pictures. My Twitter is below. And happy holidays! That concludes the mini holiday baking series for this year. I already have some recipes in mind for next year. They're a family favorite. I'm sure your family will love them too. Please let me know how it goes if you try them out. And happy holidays! Take care, you guys. Thanks for watching. Bye!